it comes to True Detective Night Country, I'm going to be completely honest and say I think it's somewhat enjoyable, but it's not without its faults. Starting with the positives though, I really enjoyed the performance of each and every actor, but especially Jodie Foster, who plays Liz Danvers, who's quite an unlikable character. Even from the first scene, she's quite unlikable, as she admits she's not a Beatles fan.
Not a Beatles fan, okay?
But in all seriousness, she's quite an ignorant character, mocking the Native Americans and the belief system they have any chance she gets, even when her daughter brings it up. And while she is that, she's also a very dedicated chief of police, something you can't fault her for. Another thing I really enjoyed is the character development we get. They really flesh out the characters, even ones who aren't getting that amount of screen time. They still make them really believable characters as well. When it comes to the story and the plot, I found it to be interesting as they have a mixture of logic and supernatural, as there are bodies found in the snow and some believe it's as simple as them freezing to death, whilst others believe that supernatural spirits are what killed them. And this is a theme that goes throughout the series, never truly getting an answer. Something else we get is the show dives into the horror / jump scare route throughout the show, and again I personally see this as trauma, either emotionally or physically, manifesting itself into their reality for the briefest of moments. Throughout this show we see a lot of emotional moments, specifically though in episode 4, where we are seeing characters hitting the lowest of their lows, which funny enough happens on Christmas Eve of all days. Something I also enjoyed is how politics got involved, somewhat similar to in series 1, as we're seeing characters as they begin to investigate this case and seeing there's a connection to a company. The company itself is trying to stop them from investigating further, as they don't want them connecting their company to the crime. And even though they have been told, not only by higher uppers of staff and the company itself, the investigators continue to pursue it, even if it means the risk of losing their jobs. Now when it comes to the finale of the show, I will say it was enjoyable, as we're seeing the detectives being able to solve both of their cases and debunk certain supernatural theories, but at the same time they do have unanswered questions, allowing them to linger around as well. I also enjoyed the character development we get from both the protagonists, as we learn about their traumas and what had happened to them previously, and we somewhat understand the characters' attitudes in their present day because of what had happened in their past. Now, that's not to say this show is far from criticism. I do have a lot of issues with this series. Firstly, I felt the story personally wasn't hooking me compared to its predecessors, even though you could somewhat describe the story. It is interesting in itself, especially when it's comparing to the previous seasons. I just think it falls flat as the story progresses. My second criticism is that the show didn't have many memorable moments, and even with the finale it was interesting, but there was nothing really standing out, unlike its previous season. My third criticism is that I didn't feel that this series felt like any of the others. It felt completely different from what True Detective usually was. Now that is for obvious reasons to an extent, as it's different writers, but even so, it just didn't feel like an additional story. It felt like something completely new. And whilst there are some elements that I really did enjoy, I personally felt like they just slapped the True Detective logo onto this series to gain viewership. If I'm being truly honest about this show, I'm gonna have to say they really didn't make the majority of these characters that likeable. Like I said earlier, Jodie Foster's character, Liz Danvers, is very unlikable, as she does make very ignorant / racist comments towards the Native Americans. Comes off as quite a racist person. It really makes it hard to support this character. Now I can slightly understand why they make this, is because the last performance most people would remember of Jodie Foster playing a law enforcement type character is Clarice from Silence of the Lambs, and obviously they don't want the comparisons, and so they kind of separate the characters, and I think they did a great job to an extent, with Clarice being very likeable and this one completely unlikable to a high degree. Now whilst I felt her character was purposely unlikable, the other characters, I think they lacked a lot of likability. For example, her partner, that being Trooper Navarro, she, in my eyes, was very obsessive over this case to the point it became annoying. And then the most likeable character is Peter Pryor, who is a young officer somewhat under the wing of Chief Liz Danvers. But the issue with him is he was very much obsessive over his work, neglecting his family and really lacking a backbone, and not even once standing up to his boss and just somewhat doing her bidding, even if it meant causing a rift with him and his family. Overall, I think this series was okay. Whilst it has interesting elements like the mystery that goes throughout the series and the character development, other than those two things, it lacks anything remotely memorable about this season. And I personally feel if this wasn't connected to True Detective, it wouldn't be that much talk around this particular season. Is this show good? I'm going to be completely honest and say it's decent. Rating wise, it's a 6 out of 10. Now when it comes to would I rewatch it, the answer is no. I have to be honest and say, pairing it to the other 3 True Detective series, this is the least. And even season 2, which is a critically hated series, still has memorable moments and great performances. And this is one that just had great performances, but nothing truly memorable, personally speaking. Now, when it comes to recommendations, of course I recommend True Detective's earlier seasons, but specifically season 1 and season 3. Not only for the performances, but the great story and narrative we get throughout. Next, I would also recommend the show The Outside, as like this, it has that weird mystery and somewhat supernatural style around it as well. The only difference is they kind of ignore logic and dive deeper into the supernatural mystery that it is, and it works really well. And lastly, if you're like me and you actually enjoy seeing Jodie Foster playing a character who's likeable, I'd recommend Silence of the Lambs. She plays a law enforcement agent who's actually a likeable person, unlike in this. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for True Detective Night Country. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.